of the group Fair Vote, advocating for election reform, also founding member of the 90s band Nirvana. Krist, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Kimberly.
So tell our viewers what Fair Vote is.
Fair Vote is an election reform group, and we advocate election methods that give voters more choices, more voices, and more power. We advocate election reforms such as ranked choice voting, proportional representation, and electoral college reform.
And so what sparked your interest in getting involved in politics? What made you make that shift from music to politics?
Well, I've been advocating election reform for 20 years now. I was involved in the Seattle music community, and there was censorship in Seattle or in Washington State, and anti-music laws. And so I got involved in trying to make the laws and rules pro-music. And along the way, I got my civic education, and I discovered that things could be better, and that there were too many uncontested elections, too many uncompetitive elections, a lot of cynicism, a lot of people disconnected. And so at the time, I was on the Alta Vista search engine, and I would type in election reform, elections, and one group came up called the Center for Voting and Democracies, now is Fair Vote, and I started working with Fair Vote. I joined the board about 12 years ago, and in 2008 I became the chair of the board of Fair Vote.
Okay, and one of the biggest issues you're advocating for is ranked choice voting. Explain to our viewers what that is.
Well, ranked choice voting, it gives power to voters because you have the ability to rank your choices. So it's like, let me conceptualize it a little bit. So in the primary election, if you voted for, say, Ted Cruz or Bernie Sanders, now in the general election, you get a second choice, okay? So with ranked choice voting, you can put your first choice down on the ballot as number one, and then say you have your second choice and you put that as your number two on the ballot. And then they count the ballots, and whoever has the most first choices, if it's a majority, they could win the election. If there's no majority, then it's like a runoff. It's kind of that primary general election dynamic. And so the last place candidate is eliminated, and those second and third choices count. Those voters' second and third choices count for the remaining candidates, and those add up until one of the candidates gets a majority and wins the election.
Okay, we are talking with Krist Novoselic of Fair Vote about election reforms and ranked voting. Viewers can join this conversation. Democrats 202-748-8000. Republicans 202-748-8001. Independents 202-748-8002. And those supporting third party candidates can call 202-748-8003. Now, is there a particular political bent of Fair Vote? Who makes up the board?
Well, we have people from all walks of life. We're a nonpartisan group. Our reforms that we advocate are legal in the United States. They're in use in the United States. And again, they're nonpartisan. There are 10 cities in the United States with 2.4 million voters that use ranked ballots.
Okay. Gary is calling in from Orchard Park, New York, on our Democratic line. Gary, you're on with Krist Novoselic.
Yes, good morning. 2 points I'd like to make, and then hopefully we'll get the comment from your guest there. The first point is, and I know it's a heavy lift, a constitutional amendment to eliminate the Electoral College and count strictly the total votes. My point number two, hopefully to get a comment, is to minimize fraud in the elections. How about a national law, not a state law where it's primarily run by states now, but a national law requiring at the time of registration the Social Security number would be put down, which in my opinion would minimize fraud. It would stop the dead people from voting because as you know, when a person passes away, the funeral director is required on the death certificate to list the Social Security number, so we can close that door too.
Okay, Gary, let's let Krist Novoselic respond.
Thanks, Gary. Ranked choice voting, and no constitutional amendment required. Proportional representation, no constitutional amendment required. It's already been tested and held up by the courts. Ranked choice voting and these election reforms are comport to equal protection of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. Again, 2.4 million voters are using this type of voting. And so what it does, this is how it gives you power as a voter, is that you could put down your first choice, somebody you really want, and not be afraid that you're going to be throwing your vote away or saying that people can't call you a spoiler. You know, people are really freaked out about elections right now here in the United States. And so people who, if you look at your Facebook feed, there's people are obsessing on one of the two major party candidates, and it's getting heavy, okay? And then so maybe you're not interested in those candidates and you want to express maybe a third party or an independent, and then you get accosted basically, like, oh my God, you're going to swing the election, you're going to throw the election away. And that doesn't happen under ranked choice voting because voters have power. So that's how you get more voices and more choices with ranked choice voting. It doesn't necessarily elect more third parties or independents. However, they're part of the dialogue because there's more civility in elections. There's a recent Rutgers University study of ranked choice voting elections in the United States, and they discovered there's less negative campaigning. There's more positive campaigning. And that's what we really need here in the United States. It just gets so toxic.
And ranked choice voting is an issue right now playing out in Maine, where there is a ballot initiative there. The website for Fair Vote, it's a fairvotemaine.org, a website devoted directly to your support for question number 5. Talk about that initiative a little bit and what it would change in Maine.
Well, Mainers need to decide for themselves if they want to have more power and more choices on the ballot. And I just came from Maine, and people are really excited about it because they really want changes. Mainers, they tend to vote for the person and not the party. Mainers have elected independent candidates. So ranked choice voting is perfect for them because it just gives you more choices on the ballot and more voices in the election.
Okay, the reviews are mixed. Bangor Daily News took a different view from that. It writes in an editorial, ranked choice voting, which a number of U.S. cities use but no state, has the potential to change the outcome in a scant number of elections. The majority of legislative races, including only two candidates in each election. A significant number of state House candidates are run unopposed. What's your reaction to that?
Ranked choice voting gives voters more power, and it gives voters more voices and more choices on the ballot itself. I mean, no election system is perfect, so it's not this cure-all panacea. However, it's a better system that we have right now. Okay, you really want to express yourself as a voter, and then you're being told that you're throwing your vote away, you're spoiling the election. Ranked choice voting works. It works in 10 cities around the United States, and voters really like it. You get to vote for the candidate who you think has the better ideas and not necessarily the most money. Okay. In San Francisco, they had ranked choice voting over the last 10 years. More women have gotten elected, and more candidates of people of color.
Okay. Sherry is calling in from Glendive, Montana on our independent line. Sherry, you're on with Krist Novoselic.
Thank you for taking my call, Krist. I've always been independent and voted either ways. I'm pushing Republican just for the simple fact I feel Obama and Clinton are pushing us towards war. I'm not sure about your, I know we need reform and need to look into what you're talking about by your numbering system a little more. We definitely need the elections to change. It seems that we don't get to hear their policies anymore.
All right, Sherry, let's let Krist Novoselic respond.
Absolutely, Sherry. you go to fairvote.org, and there's plenty of information about ranked choice voting. It's a ranking system, so you really want to express yourself. So you get a first choice, and that first choice doesn't count against your second or third choice. Okay, so then you put down a second choice, and they count the ballots. And on this version of ranked choice voting in Maine, it elects majority winners. Instead of, what they do in Maine is they elect candidates who have a minority. And so the majority of voters, they have like three-way races in Maine because they're independent. And the majority of voters, the most voters, voted for someone else. And that's not good for government. We should have majority winners.
And on the website, fairvote.org, it also talks about the possibility of ranked choice voting in congressional races. It says here that it furthers the ideal of proportional representation. It says the use of winner-take-all voting methods in our elections for state legislatures and Congress is a central reason for major problems with our politics, gerrymandering, partisan gridlock, no-choice elections, and distortions in fair representation. Talk a little bit more about that.
We need to end gerrymandering once and for all. We need to take the power away from the insiders, the partisans, who draw the maps to benefit themselves and their parties. And we need to put power in the hands where it belongs, with voters. Voters have the power. So imagine instead of some commission somewhere or insiders drawing who the winners are and who the losers are before any ballot is cast, voters have the power to decide who represents them. So imagine a district, say 3-seat district, and voters decide we want to elect 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat, or we want to elect 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. Then there's also space for independents and third parties. And politics are so polarized in the United States. What ranked choice voting, the proportional version of it, promises is more bridge builder candidates, because we'd be electing more urban Republicans and more rural Democrats. So this is what it boils down to. No more gerrymandering. No more politicians and insiders drawing maps to benefit themselves. If you are a taxpayer and if you are subject to the laws and rules of the land, you should decide who represents you in Congress or your state legislature or your city council, and not some insiders gerrymandering maps to benefit themselves.
Okay, we have a Mainer calling in. Helen's calling in from Winthrop, Maine on our Democratic line. Helen, you are on with Krist Novoselic.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so much for all your help from Fair Vote. I'm a proud member of the Maine League of Women Voters, and we've really worked hard to get this initiative on the ballot. I think there's been some pushback from some quarters because we have, let's say, a quite unpopular governor. But if you look back historically, both Democrats and Republicans have not received a majority of votes. So I think your point is very well taken about how this has really implications for both parties and independents in particular. So I just want to thank you for your work. We're hopeful that this will pass. Thank you.
Thanks for calling. Ranked choice voting is not about fair vote. Ranked choice voting is about Maine. It is about the needs and values of Maine voters. And there we had a Maine voter who just called us and expressed what her needs are and her values are. And it's about putting power in the hands of voters.
Okay. Up next, we have Charles calling in from Alexandria, Virginia on our Republican line. Good morning, Charles.
Yes, good morning. Just a couple of short comments. First, I would think it would be great if we could eliminate congressional districts entirely and have Congress people elected at large from the entire state. That would eliminate gerrymandering, give more opportunity to minority representation. Another thing I'd like to see, nobody ever talks about it, is to have none of the above on the ballot. Vote for candidate A, candidate B, candidate C. If you don't like them, you vote for none of the above. And if none of the above wins, you throw them out and do it all over again. Another thing about the Electoral College nobody ever talks about is people are disenfranchised. If you're a Republican in Washington, D.C., or a Democrat in Utah, you are disenfranchised. You shouldn't even, no reason to go in to vote.
All right, Charles, that's a lot to unpack. Let's let Chris take a shot at it.
Thanks, Charles. Fair Vote does not support winner-take-all. I mean, we do not support winner-take-all elections. We do not support the none-of-the-above ballot idea. But it's interesting you bring up like at-large elections, because that's what we call it fair representation voting, the American version of proportional representation, where voters get a share of the vote. So you need to do that with modified at-large districts. Now, these are not winner-take-all at-large districts. There's a lot of problems with those. These are modified at-large districts where voters can win seats proportionally. And Charles also brought up opportunities for minorities. Well, where do you find fair representation voting, where voters share representation and don't have winner-take-all rules? You find it in the case law with the Voting Rights Act. There are over 100 cities in the United States that have solved the issue of racially polarized voting and the issues of race in politics. And through the Voting Rights Act of 1965, instead of single-member districts, they have cities and school boards, 100 in the United States, use these fair voting methods to elect, to have fair elections for all people and make opportunities for minorities, for people from all walks of life.
So talk a little bit about your 3 American Questions campaign.
Well, 3 American Questions is different than Fair Vote, and it's about trying to bring more substance to this election, to the 2016 election. And so we're saying, so I'm switching gears now from election reform into 3 American Questions. And so, and it also appeals to like millennials. And so, you know, there's a lot of like lurid allegations out there, lurid revelations out there. And if we can get past that and ask our lawmakers 3 things, our candidates 3 things also, is what are you going to do about climate change? What are you going to do about the debt, over $19 trillion debt? And what are you going to do about government reform? The things that I'm talking about with Fair Vote.
And how did you settle on these 3 questions? What is it about these areas?
You know, it's really important. It's about our future, because these problems are compounding. The climate's changing, and we should have policies that do something to try to remedy these things. And I also believe that we should have personal practices if we can just live our lives in a way that has a less impact on climate change. The debt itself is, over $19 trillion. Just paying that money back is going to be an entitlement itself, a government program. And so lawmakers need to start thinking about and expressing ways that they're going to reduce the debt. And then my favorite issue is, because it's the scope of what I've been doing, is with election reform, is how are we going to make government working again? So, I'm really excited about ranked choice voting in Maine. It's, I live in Washington State, so it's up to Mainers to decide. Ranked choice voting, it's question 5 on the ballot, and is how are you going to give yourself more powers? And this is, again, it's a nonpartisan election reform. It's good for conservatives, it's good for liberals, it's great for moderates, it's good for Democrats, it's good for Republicans, and it gives space for third parties and independents. And you could really check it out. Go to fairvote.org, and there's so much information out there. And of course, you have the world at your fingertips. You go out there and do a word search on your favorite search engine, and you can, like I did 20 years ago, and you can find out so many things and decide for yourself.
All right, we are talking to Krist Novoselic, chairman of Fair Vote. You can find, as he said, fairvote.org. Also a founding member of the band Nirvana, as well as a past founder of Jam Pack, Joint Artists and Music Promotion Political Action Committee, which you founded in 1995. Catherine is calling from San Anselmo, California, on our Democratic line. Good morning, Catherine.
Good morning, and it's San Anselmo.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
And thank you, and thanks to C-SPAN for what you're doing. My problem is unless we take all the money out of politics, we are never going to be a fair system. The money in politics, like in California, I was just reading yesterday, $475 million that has been given to people running for office. It is absolutely sickening to think of what's happening. And with this election, my goodness, we can't even depend now on the judicial system, because to me, they're coming across as being so corrupt.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about campaign finance reform? Is that a big issue for Fair Vote?
It's not at all. It's not at all. Like, we're not a campaign finance group. However, ranked choice voting and fair representation voting have shown to negate the impact of money in politics. We've seen elections under ranked choice voting where the candidate who didn't raise the most money won the election. And how do you do that as a candidate? Right? The current system is you have your base and you get your base solid, then you go out there and you bash the opponent. And so we get all this negative campaigning, which costs millions of dollars. You got to buy television ads, newspaper ads, radio ads, internet ads, and a lot of it's just negative. So with ranked choice voting, you've got your base. Those are all your first choices. And then if you do your polling, you see like, hey, I don't have a majority to win. So I need to reach out to voters' second and third choice. And how do you do that? You go out and meet people. You have you work with groups that go out and knock on doors, that hand out handbills. It's like more grassroots oriented campaigning. So our caller was from California, and if she's interested and concerned about campaign finance, which we all are, I am, maybe she should look at the existing California state rules about how they elect their state legislature and their governor and many local elections, and see what the impact of that is on transparency, on fundraising, and on polarization. I think California's top two election system is failing. And we see it in the Senate race with the Harris versus Sanchez race. Okay, but instead of getting into all that, our California caller, she should check out elections in the Bay Area, San Francisco, San Leandro, Berkeley, Oakland. They all use ranked choice voting. And you can vote for the candidate with the best ideas and not necessarily the one with the biggest bank accounts. And again, more diversity in elections, more choices in elections. That's what it's all about.
Okay. Describe your politics, and who are you supporting in the presidential race this year?
Well, I'm a raging moderate, and I vote for the person and not the party. I'm voting for Gary Johnson for president and Bill Weld for vice president, and I'm glad to be doing that. And I'm not a libertarian with a capital L. I can be like a small L libertarian, but there's other things. I support public power, public lands. I just feel like I'm a moderate candidate, and a lot of times, well, I feel like I'm just getting boxed into these categories. It's just like the blue box or the red box. So maybe I'm purple, okay? It's just like when you mix those colors, and we have this like binary election system where you need to vote for the orange one or the pantsuit one, which is fine if you're doing that, and I respect that, and because people need to express themselves. However, I feel like I have more choices. I need to have more choices. So that's why I've been advocating election reforms for 20 years now that does that, and it reflects my values. I don't want to be boxed into this party box. I want to see what the candidate has to say. What are your policy proposals? Where do you come from? Where are you going to take us? I'm tired of the negative campaigning. There's a Rutgers University study of ranked choice voting. It showed there's just less negative campaigning. Why is that? Because voters or candidates are reaching out for more those second and third choices. And so they want to bring people in instead of pushing them away or clobbering them over the head.
Okay, we are talking with Krist Novoselic, chairman of Fair Vote. founding member of the band Nirvana, and also author of the book Of Grunge and Government, Let's Fix This Broken Democracy. Up next, we have Lynn calling in from Rome, Georgia on an independent line. Good morning, Lynn.
Good morning. It's an honor. I asked the screener, I said, is this really the guy from the band Nirvana, or is this like some subset group? I'm showing my age. It was an enjoyment to see you. I went to Brenau, campus not far from the University of Georgia. Enjoyed seeing you with Widespread Panic. Anyway, I will get back to politics, but I was a grunge girl back in my college
You'll
days.
always be a grunge girl. Once a grunge girl, always a grunge girl.
I wore the flannels, I wore the boots, and I enjoyed y'all very, very much. However, we will get back to politics. So that being said, here's my thing. I enjoyed very much what you just said about you kind of being in the middle. I find myself being a moderate conservative Republican. Georgia is right now the fourth leading state in illegal immigrants. I believe in legal immigration. However, if you'll notice on the Electoral College, Georgia is starting to become more of a pink state. And what I just found out recently is that even though we require ID at the when you go to vote, they're not requiring anyone to prove citizenship. However, as we're hearing from Hillary Clinton, and I'm a Second Amendment person. I believe in it strongly. Of course, I don't want anyone with any kind of heinous background or anything who's domestic violence or anything to be able to have a gun. I'm common sense, gun control. But my problem is that if you're not a citizen of this country or anything, I don't believe you should be able to cast a vote in our election.
All right, Chris. All right, Lynn. Let's let Chris respond to that.
Yeah, those are big concerns. I think what you need to do is to talk to your state representatives, state senators, your state legislators, and even in your United States congressional delegation, and express those concerns. And those are the kind of things we need to have in a kind of discussion we need to have with our elections. And if we have more positive campaigning, more substantial campaigning, and more voices, more choices out there appealing and reaching out to you as a voter, I think you can better express what your concerns are. And the ranked choice ballot is super easy. And that Rutgers University study I showed also said it was over 75% of the voters said that it was a super easy process. You rank a first choice, second choice, and third choice. Well, how do you make your choices? You pay attention to issues, and you see what candidates are espousing the issues that you're concerned about. What candidates are expressing your needs and values the best. And you have a first choice, and you vote them as your first choice. You have a second choice, you vote them as your second choice. Everybody gets one ballot. All the choices are the same. The counting process is the same. This is equal protection, is what it is. And so everybody has their own needs and values, and ranked choice voting gives you the power, the sophistication as a voter to express what your needs are.
Let's take a moment to talk about music. This is C-SPAN, but we can talk about music too. 2016 represents the 25th anniversary of the release of Nirvana's Nevermind. It's crucial to the soundtrack of Lynn's life, my life too. Many listeners, I have my copy of the CD right here. Talk a little bit about the historic significance of this album, and did you expect that to happen when you recorded it?
25 years went by so fast, okay? And there's so many great records out there. So many great records. I love records and music, and I listen to all kinds of music. I have thousands and thousands of LPs. I'm like a vinyl nut collector. And so I'm just happy and honored that Nirvana is considered as part of that canon of great music. So thank you, and thank you listeners out there who do that for us. And there's a lot of great bands that came before us. There's a lot of great bands that came after us to keep the rock and roll going. You know, Dave Grohl, he's selling out stadiums. He's flying the flag for rock and roll. 25th anniversary, it's always a good time to remember Kurt Cobain. And, you know, I just say, in a simple answer, thank you.
All right, Eleanor is calling in from Clemson, South Carolina on our independent line. You are on with Krist Novoselic.
Hi, thank you. And thank you for doing all the good work you're doing at Fair Vote. My concern is with implementation of the counting of the ballots when you're counting using machines. There's got to be some way to check. You've got to have paper ballots, of course, but people have got to be able to recount in some manner. I just don't trust the machines to implement ranked choice.
Well, when you have elections, there's like 9,000 jurisdictions in the United States now that do elections, and everyone's different. Things are really decentralized, and there's all this talk about rigging elections, and I don't really buy it. Again, because of the decentralized nature of our elections. In my county where I live, we have paper ballots, and you have to fill the ballot out with a pen. And so I'm not really worried about anybody rigging the election, because there's a paper document. The ballot is a record, okay? And so ranked choice voting is not much different. I mean, you have the same vendors that do the ballots, the old-fashioned ballots. They can do ranked choice voting ballots, and it's up to the voter to, you know, use a pen and a paper with the ranked choice voting ballots. This system is not a new system. It's like 150 years old, and it actually got a lot of use in the United States about 100 years ago during the Progressive era. They didn't have computers or machines back then. You can do a hand count of ranked choice voting. Again, if you go online and if you look at some videos, there's some great demonstrations of how they use Post-it notes on how ranked choice voting works. So you shouldn't really be afraid of any kind of like voter fraud with ranked choice voting. Not at all.
Now, one criticism of ranked choice voting is that more choices does not necessarily mean better choices. Catherine Rampell from the Washington Post pointed out that while often the argument is made that third-party candidates are unviable, and by voting for them you're throwing a vote away, she writes, but these third-party options are bad candidates not just because of their impracticality, or their underdog status, or their lack of exposure, or some nonsense about a rigged political system. Johnson and Stein are, on their own merits, terrible, unserious choices. They are unfit for office. What's your reaction to that?
That's her opinion if she thinks Johnson and Stein are unfit for office, and she's entitled to that opinion. The last election in Minneapolis, there was like 25 ballots. I'm just, you know, ballparking it. There's like 25 candidates on the ballot. And voters worked through those ballots. Sure, there were these fringe party candidates, or fringe candidates. They got a minuscule share of the vote. They just, in my opinion, if I would express my opinion, they cluttered the ballot, okay? So, and voters negotiated the ballot just fine. And then a favorite candidate won the election. It would cost like $45 to get on the ballot in Minneapolis. There was a ranked choice voting next door at the same time in St. Paul, Twin Cities, okay? There were 6 candidates on the ballot. Why is that? Because the ballot access, it costs more money to get on the ballot. So you can just kind of tweak things like that. And you're always going to have unviable candidates or showboats or crusaders. And you can put the brakes on democracy a little bit. You can have reasonable ballot access requirements, but not, you know, heavy ones. I don't think that's good either. So, but again, this is with the beauty of America. I mean, you could stand on a street corner and hold up a sign, you know, the end is near. I mean, crusading is not against the law. Showboating is not against the law. Okay, but we can have reasonable ballot access rules, and ranked choice voting can accommodate all the choices.
Okay, Rowan's calling in from Salem, New Hampshire on our independent line. Rowan, you're on with Krist Novoselic.
Yes, I got a question in regards to voter fraud. I called Senator Kennedy's office years ago in regards to fraud. I see people from Massachusetts with different IDs. You can get a license anywhere, all right? They go to New York, they collect food stamps and that over there, and then they come to Massachusetts and they collect over here. I suggested to Senator Kennedy, all they had to do was put a thumbprint and your picture on your Social Security, and it would stop the fraud. I was told it would cost too much money. But that's how they're getting these illegals are getting their stuff, because they can get a license anywhere.
Okay, let's let Krist Novoselic respond.
Again, that's an issue for your state legislators, your congressional representatives, and they need to respond to people. And if there's enough concern for that kind of issue, they'll respond. Yeah.
Okay. You considered running for lieutenant governor of Washington at one point. Why did you decide against that? And is there a chance you'll run for office in the future?
I'm in 2 bands right now, so I'm having a blast. You know, I went to college and I graduated with a degree in social sciences last May. And so I'm having a real blast. And, you know, I'm the chair of Fair Vote, and I get to be on C-SPAN with you, Kimberly, and get to take calls and you know, travel. And I'm pretty happy. And I don't know if at this point in my life, I don't really need the job of being like a lawmaker, and because if I were to do it, I would take it really seriously. And you know, I take what I do right now seriously, and I love playing music. I play guitar and accordion every day, and I love playing in my bands. And
all right, what bands are you in? Talk about it.
I'm in Giants in the Trees, which is like a rock band, and then I'm in another band that's kind of more arty, and it's called Butterfly Launches Off Spar Pole. See, even the name is like Dali-esque.
All right, Sherry is calling in from Alfred, Maine on our Democratic line. Sherry, you're on with Krist Novoselic.
Good morning. I hate to date myself, but the Beatles is my favorite band of all time.
Bravo. I tend to agree with you, and I'm not dating myself.
And we have early voting in Maine. I already voted a week and a half ago. And I like that ranked voting thing.
You voted yes, good.
Yes. Is there anything we can do about term limits? The president can only be there 8 years. Some of these congressmen, half of them probably have dementia. Is there anything we can do about term limits?
Term limits is not a policy proposal of Fair Vote. And there's some good groups out there that are proposing term limits. And so, again, there's so many opportunities for people to get involved in elections and not necessarily run for office. You can work with a citizens group, a nonprofit campaign. I mean, you could work to get a stop sign at the end of your block or to make an intersection safer. I mean, that's civic participation. And that's what I've been always been interested in. You know, I work with my local Grange, which is like a rural fraternal group, and you know, I stay connected with the community, and I find it really rewarding. And so, you know, like it's a relationship. So, you know, you give something, but you want to get something back too. And so, if you're concerned about term limits, or you know, I'm concerned about election reform, with like how to give voters more choices, more voices, and more power. That's why I support ranked choice voting. I support fair representation voting, which is a proportional system where we get rid of gerrymandering once and for all, because we give voters more power.
Okay, Lee is calling in from Cedartown, Georgia on our Republican line. Good morning, Lee.
Yes, I was just wondering if illegal immigrants in Georgia can get a driver's license.
I'm not from Georgia. I don't know. I don't really know about that.
Okay.
That issue.
All right. Tom's calling in from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on our Democratic line. Good morning, Tom.
Hi, good morning. After the 2000 election, I want to say it was Bobby Kennedy Jr., one of the descendants of the Kennedys. He was going on all the talk shows and everything. He was talking about how to ensure fair voting. He was really concerned. In fact, Rolling Stone did a big article on it. And I was just wondering whatever happened to that.
I don't know what happened to that. I mean, that's a big issue, voter fraud, and I'm concerned about voter fraud. I don't want somebody to steal the election. But if you think that there's some conspiracy to steal elections and you have evidence, call your local law enforcement right away. Call your local United States attorney, call your local county sheriff, your district attorney, and give them this evidence so we don't have a rigged election. It's simple as that. But if you go online, there's all these videos about these conspiracies, and they're spooky and they're shady. But you know, if anything was really true, I mean, where are the prosecutions? Okay, there would be prosecutions. We have good law enforcement out there, and people who would, you know, but you need to have real evidence and not this, you know, internet innuendo.
Tell us
the grassy knoll. Sorry.
Okay. No, it's all right. Tell us quickly why you're here in Washington, D.C. this weekend.
Well, I'm here to support ranked choice voting, advocate for it, to join you, Kimberly. I'm doing a TED Talk. I'm here to take in the sights of our national capital and, you know, feel the energy here, which is, I think it's a really good energy. It's Washington, D.C. is a great city. There's a lot to see and a lot to do. And if you're interested in elections and politics, there's a lot of opportunities to get involved. There's all kinds of groups out there advocating things to make our country better.
Okay, Walter's calling in from Cartersville, Georgia on our Republican line. Good morning, Walter.
Good morning. I am a Republican registered. I voted as a registered Republican, but now I'm not voting for this gentleman who doesn't have any class, no knowledge of how to handle or talk to people. He is a narcissist. I'm going to vote for Mrs. Clinton, and I am surprised that very few people accept the fact that she's a very classy lady, very intelligent woman, and a very much beneficial to the United States.
All right, Walter, let's give... okay, sorry. Go ahead. Get to your question.
Give me 10 seconds, please. Okay. One of the first speeches of Mr. Trump that nobody noticed, as far as I know, and I'm a junkie of politics, he praised Adolf Hitler and the book Mein Kampf, and he talked about the inconvenience of Hitler was he had to deal with the two assemblies in the 1930s.
All right, Walter, let's see if Krist Novoselic has a response to that.
I think Walter is a great example of the passion for politics. And so Walter's a Republican voter, but he doesn't like the nominee. He wants another choice. Ranked choice voting is perfect for Walter, okay? And I'll go back to what I said earlier, like, you can have a second choice. So say if you voted for Cruz or Bernie Sanders in the primary election, they didn't win. So now you need to have a second choice, right? So ranked choice voting on one ballot gives you a second choice. So if there's a candidate that you really don't like, and you're not necessarily throwing your vote away, you're not wasting your vote, you're not having your friends on Facebook telling you you're spoiling the election and freaking out on you, you say, hey, this is how I want to vote. Walter has the right to vote how he sees fit. And that's what I believe. We all have that vote. And so ranked choice voting gives us that power to express our preferences. We get a first choice, a second choice, a third choice. 2.4 million Americans are using ranked ballots in the United States today.
Okay.
In 10 cities.
Okay, Maurice is calling in from East Dublin, Georgia on our Democratic line. Maurice, you're on with Krist Novoselic.
Good morning, how are you?
Great.
Well, first and foremost, I am a fan of Nirvana, especially the first two albums. Secondly, I have some questions. I am also a fan of ranked choice voting. I think that it would go a long way towards solving the problem of democracy in and of itself. But how do you feel about proportional representation of electoral college ballots, also public financing of campaigns, also conscripted or mandatory voting in and of itself?
All right, Maurice, let's let him, within the few seconds we have left,
well,
try to unpack that.
Thanks for the kind words, Maurice. Electoral college reform, there's Fair Vote supports the National Popular Vote Plan. Do a word search and check it out. And, you know, there's three basic things that Fair Vote advocates. It's ranked choice voting for single-member districts and ranked choice voting for proportional representation. So that's like two things. And an electoral college reform in the form of the national popular vote. So that's what we're advocating. We think that would give voters more power. It would make our elections positive and give us the choices that we are demanding as modern consumers.
All right, Krist Novoselic, chairman of Fair Vote, founding member and bassist for the band Nirvana, and author of Grunge and Government. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Kimberly.